Why don't you swing down, sweet Harrison, and let me ride? Swing down, Harrison. The good old days when they preached amazing grace. Some morning you'll find me touring that city where some climbing higher and higher and on down.
After all the years the Lord live in this old house.
Born November 19, 1924 in Lakeland, Florida, to Leela Lee and John Sumner, a baby boy was christened John Daniel Sumner, the youngest of 4 children. He would soon be known as JD.
When I was a kid, I was raised up in a Pentecostal church. In June, we had a big camp meeting in Wimauma, Florida, and Frank Stamps was my idol when I was 4 years old. He came to the Church of God camp meeting in Florida and sung Stand By Me to 10,000 people without a microphone. And my mother said that, I said that night that at me 4 years old, I was going to be a bass singer, just like Mr. Frank Stamps.
Times were hard, and JD spent most of his time farming with his father. His mother worked in a canning factory, and this is where he met the love of his life, Mary. JD and Mary were wed on June 14, 1941. JD was just 16 years old, and his bride the tender age of 17. In 1943, the Sumners adopted a little girl named Frances, and shortly thereafter, JD was drafted into the Army. While in basic training, Mary learned she was expecting another baby.
Shortly before his unit was to be shipped overseas, Daddy received word from the family that Mother was giving birth, prematurely, and that because, she was so small and it was so early that they weren't expecting me to live, and, it was somewhat dangerous for Mother too. Of course, they had previously adopted my sister Frances, and she at that time was somewhere between 3 and 4. And so the Army gave Daddy leave to come home. But while he was at home with the family going through this crisis, his company was shipped out. So instead of him going overseas, he served stateside.
Soon after his discharge, JD's professional singing career would have humble beginnings as the bass singer for the Sunny South Quartet, replacing Big Chief Wetherington. Members of the popular Sunny South included Horace Floyd, Roger Clark, Quentin Hicks, and Jake Hess.
We moved to Tampa after he joined the Sunny South, and I remember him going off every weekend. That was his early beginnings in a quartet. We were very poor. We lived in the project until we moved basically to Atlanta when he joined the Sunshine Boys.
I first saw JD with the Sunshine Boys, way back yonder. I can't even remember when. I was a small kid. And of course, JD was a great singer, and he had this aura around him that it drew the attention to him, And I was in awe of him, to tell you the truth about it.
Those were just, great times, and it was when the family began to realize that Daddy was actually, I think, in show business. There's some hilarious stories about, like, Wileen and Mosey Lister coming down for dinner, and Mother trying to serve dinner by candlelight, but I'm sure our dinner was probably fried chicken and pork and beans and gravy, because that was like filet mignon to us.
So I finally got to join a quartet that was from Atlanta, the Sunshine Boys. They were very low on the totem pole. So we moved on Boulevard Place, and up the street was Mosey Lister and his wife, and I thought the best way to get him with the big boys was to have them down for supper. So we invited them down for supper. And my wife fixed supper and had candles and everything on the table. We was trying to really act like one of the boys. And my thyroid glands had swollen up. And so while we was eating supper under candlelight, I said, I was raised Pentecostal. And I never, so God help me, I never heard the word hemorrhoid. If you'd have said that at our house, you'd have got a whipping. You know, it was nasty. So I knew nothing about no roids, you know, I didn't know it. So I reached up and I said, man, my hemorrhoids is killing me. And Moses Lister said, well, if they're up that high, no wonder they're killing you.
In order to travel to their growing singing engagements across the country, the Sunshine Boys purchased a 1947 Cadillac limousine that had a worn-out wheel bearing. Shortly after they soon realized they'd purchased a lemon, they insured the car, hoping for the chance to collect on a better ride.
We had a 47 Cadillac, 9-passenger. We were going along, and JD was driving, and the wheel bearing was going out in the back, and it was going vroom, 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 grinding like that, see. I said, JD, you might better stop. He said, oh, I said, it'd be okay. So he kept driving.
They said, don't stop, just keep driving, maybe to catch on fire. Burn up and we'll collect the insurance on it. So I drove and wah, 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 wah.
So we got into Lewistown. There's an all-night service station there. JD pulled right up in the service station, right in front of the gas pumps. We all got out, and he went around to the back to look up under it, just see what was happening. We knew it was a wheel bearing, but you couldn't tell which one it was.
So I pulled into the filling station, and just time I stopped, a blaze. It did catch on fire.
It started burning right under the gas tank. The guy from the service station came running out there. And he said, I'll call the fire department. JD says, mind your own business, it's insured. And it was wore out anyway.
But what I didn't know, right across the street was the state's school for firemen. They had 400 firemen right across the street. And here they come with them hose and completely ruined the car. Of course, they saved it, which was bad luck.
And then, of course, all we could do was drive it the way it was. For about 2 months after that, had a great big hole burned in the back seat. And that burnt cotton didn't smell too well for a couple of months after that.
The Lord, I think, sort of punished us for trying to collect insurance on a wheelbarrow.
In 1950, the Sunshine Boys were beckoned to the silver screen to star as singing cowboys for Columbia Pictures. They appeared in over 19 westerns with cowboy stars Charles Starrett and Smiley Burnett.
Of course, I was raised on a farm and knew how to ride horses, but of course, certainly didn't know anything about the movies. And the worst thing that happened to me was I was so big and tall, there were very few people that was my size. So they had nothing to fit me, so they had to get brand new clothes for me. And they got me a pretty cowboy hat. I had a handkerchief up here, and brand new shirt, boots. Man, I looked good. So I come on the set. Well, the director said, who in the H do you think you are? You are not Charles Starrett. You know, he said, come here. He got my hat down and threw it in the ground and stopped it and rubbed his feet in, tucked my shirt and tore it. My handkerchief got in and wadded it up, put it in the dirt, rubbed it on. I looked pretty bad when I got through. I wasn't near the star. But it was something that was an experience. And the singing in the movies and being a cowboy, it was a lot of fun.
My first remembrances of JD and the Sunshine Boys, we had made some remark that they had heard, or they heard we'd made a remark, something regarding the Sunshine Boys that they didn't feel was complimentary or something. So they said the next time that Blackwood Brothers and Sunshine Boys met, that they were going to whip us. And supposedly that Ace Richmond, who's the manager of the Sunshine Boys, he was going to fight R.W. and J.D. was going to fight me. And so J.D. was 6'6" and I was 5'6". So if that fight had come off, that the top of my head and JD's shins would have really been sore.
A recent survey made by the National Association of Music Merchants to determine the most popular kind of music in America found it to be religious music of all types. And within this field of entertainment, it is generally conceded that the top gospel quartet in the nation is the Blackwood Brothers Quartet. Over 2 million Blackwood Brothers RCA Victor records have been sold throughout the United States. Their recordings have been shipped to almost every country in the world, with the exception of those countries behind the Iron Curtain. Music and record shops across the nation feature hundreds of Blackwood records and sheet music. Millions from Maine to California listen daily to several hundred radio stations featuring Blackwood Brothers recordings and the very popular Blackwood Brothers radio program. The quartet has made guest appearances on the coast-to-coast radio networks of NBC, CBS, and ABC. During June 1954, the Blackwoods appeared on Arthur Godfrey's Talent Scouts, a CBS television network show. They walked away with top honors and literally rocked the applause meter beyond its maximum. The producer of the show stated that the quartet drew more spontaneous acclaim than anyone else they had ever had to appear.
Where the seagull was down in the middle of the field, he saw an angel waiting on a chariot wheel. He passes so quickly on the chariot wheel, he just wanted to see how a chariot wheel. Why don't you swing down, sweet chariot, stop and let me ride. Swing down, chariot, stop and let me ride. Rock me, Lord, calm and easy. I got a hold on the other side. Swing, swing, well, look yonder. Where the seagull went down and he got on the board, the chariot went up and on down the road. See, Presley was thinking about the pumping of the road. He just wanted to lay down his heavy load. Why don't you swing down, sweet chariot, stop and let me ride. Swing down, chariot, stop and let me ride. Rock me, Lord, calm and easy. I got a hole on the other side. Well, I got a father from the promised land, but I won't stop until I shake his hand. Rock me, Lord, calm and easy. I got a hole on the other side. Why don't you swing down, sweet chariot, stop and let me ride. Swing down, chariot, stop and let me ride. Rock me, Lord, calm and easy. I got a home on the other side. Yes!
3.5 weeks after our appearance on the Godfrey Show, we had a plane crash in Clanton, Alabama. We at the time were traveling by private plane. R.W. Blackwood, my nephew, was the pilot. Bill Lyles, our bass, was the co-pilot. And in a fire wreck crash in Clanton, Alabama, on the 30th of June, 1954, R.W. Blackwood and Bill Lyles were both killed in the plane. The concert that night with the Blackwoods and Statesmen was to have been held in the airport hangar in this little town. And R.W. and Bill had taken the plane up late afternoon to check something out, and something went wrong in the attempt to land, and it crashed. I was standing watching it, as were several hundred people who had already gathered for the concert. And I started running toward it before it ever hit the ground. I could see my nephew, R.W., still strapped in his seat through the flames. It immediately went up in flames. And I was told that I started into the plane, not knowing what I was doing. I was in a state of shock. Someone picked me up from behind and held me and carried me off the field. For some years, I really didn't dawn on me who it was, because I was in such a state of shock at the time. Some years later, Jake Hess said, "Do you remember who it was that kept you from going in that burning plane?" I said, "No, I really don't." He said, "It was me." He said, "I just had to handle you and hold you and keep you from going in it." As the Statesmen put me in their car and took me to Memphis that night, I said I'd never sing again. I was through. There we'd just won the Godfrey Show and top-selling record, and thousands of people coming out to hear us, the highest point in our career, and it all went up in flames. I didn't think I could ever sing again. And I don't think it was my prayers. I think it was the prayers of thousands of people praying for me that God showed me He still had something left for me to do. So almost immediately I reorganized the quartet.
You know, after the plane crash where he lost R.W. and Bill Lyles, talking about a day or two after about, he'd said he'd never sing again and so on and so forth. And I told him, well, he had to sing, you know. That's what God put him here to do. That was his job, and that was his calling in life and so on, so the people expect him. He said, who would I get for a bass singer? And I said, JD Sumner. He looked at me and sort of grinned. Okay. But I said, you're going to need somebody to take care of things, to help head everything up, and not only does he sing bass, they wouldn't be comparing JD to Bill Lyles, because it's like oranges and apples. And if you get some smooth voice bass singer in here, he will never be as good as Bill Lyles. So I convinced him that's what he should do.
George Yonts said that he came over and auditioned. I don't remember it, but other people says he did too.
I wasn't exactly what they was looking for. I was a kind of a smooth bass singer, like on the type of Bill Lyles, not anywhere near that good, but that type, you know. And they was looking for something completely different, which was a good move for them, you know.
I remember that I considered 2 or 3 other bass singers, and somebody gave me a little 45 record of JD singing "Oh Happy Day." I listened to that record, and it intrigued me, it interested me, him singing it, the way he sang it. So I called JD and asked him if he'd be interested in joining us, and told him I'd either give him a salary of so much or he could buy into the group as a full partner. And he said, well, he wanted to think about it and pray about it. So a few days later, he called me back, said he felt it was the Lord's will that he come, and wanted to buy in as a full partner, which he did in the Blackwood Brothers Quartet.
When I got the chance after the airplane crash, and the manager of the quartet, H. Richmond, said, George said, I think you ought not turn down this opportunity. Go ahead, you know. And he cried. It was pretty touching. A quartet is like a family. You know, you fuss and fight and cuss one another, but bottom line, you love one another, and it was a hard decision to make.
Inside the gate, inside the gate of home, sweet home, no more to cry, no more to die, a crown of life you've won, you're safe at last, your sorrows past, a mansion here forevermore. Yes, all of this I'll hear him say when I step inside the gate. He's inside the gate. Inside the gate. Inside the gate.
We went to a concert to see the Blackwood Brothers and the Statesmen, and then I really got it. Seeing those guys up there, and those great suits, and those great haircuts, and those pencil-thin mustaches, and that was amazing to me. It was like seeing, those were stars to me.
Yes, all of this I hear him say when I step inside the gate.
I'd like to point out that that low voice there belongs to JD Sumner, America's lowest bass singer. And now let's pause for a moment while a friend of yours brings you a very important message.
It was JD's idea to get a bus, and he took a lot of ribbing about that. I remember somebody in the group said, well, we could get a train car, you know, and go up and down in the country in a train car. Somebody said, well, we could get a boat and go up and down the rivers, you know, in a boat.
Back in the early days, when you get through, there's 2 in the front and 3 in the back, a 5-man quartet. Well, every 2 hours you switched, you know. But the one in the middle in the back, when you went to sleep, your legs would fall over on the other guys with you. So you took your belt off, strapped it around your knees and buckled it, and folded your arms and went to sleep like that. So when you relaxed, when you went to sleep, your legs wouldn't fall over on the other guys, you know. So those were rough days traveling.
That was the best idea he ever had. Because it's, you know, it's nice to get in that bunk and go to sleep and pull that curtain around you and read a book. And then be like this for 500 miles, guy on Penrod on one side and Bill Gaither on the other. That's between ugly and ugly.
I kept bugging James. And James finally said, well, if you think you can do it, do it. And so I bought a 37 Aero coach and customized it.
At first, we put in 5 big recliner chairs in the bus, and we'd sit in those in the daytime and lean them back and sleep in them at night. And then we put in some bunk beds, and at first we put in inner-spring mattresses. But that didn't work because it bounced too bad going up and down the highway. So we took those out and put in about 6-inch foam rubber mattresses. That worked.
When I was in the Army, I used to take patients home and always had a Pullman. I had me a private compartment in the Pullman. And so I said, man, wouldn't that be something to have the same thing in a bus?
When JD got the bus, I said it isn't practical. It won't work. And coming in from left Little Rock one Sunday afternoon going into Fort Worth, and he said, why don't you get on the bus? I want to talk to you about some things. But when I got on the bus, he had my bed ready and all that sort of stuff. I went back there and went to sleep, and I woke up in Fort Worth. So we, George and I, got Hovey down there at the record shop, at the coffee shop, and told him that we thought we needed both of us to get a bus. And so Hovey agreed, and we went to Dallas and bought 2 buses, and just alike, you know, had those twin buses.
The bus is the greatest. I think it's the greatest thing I've done. I'm proud of that anything.
Traveling by bus was not JD's only innovation to help propel the gospel music industry forward. It was also JD's idea to begin an annual convention of quartets.
We were talking one day, and JD said it would be nice. Sometimes we'd have concerts around the country where we'd have 2 or 3 maybe quartets together. But he said it'd be nice if we had a time and a place every year where all the groups came together for perhaps a weekend or a Friday and Saturday.
And I always tried to get the Sunshine Boys to do it, and I was with them, and they wouldn't do it. And when I came with the Blackwood brothers, with James, finally got sold on the idea. So we couldn't call it the camp meeting of gospel music, so we just called it the National Quartet Convention.
And at the same time, we organized the Gospel Music Association, GMA, and the Gospel Music Hall of Fame. We had our attorneys secure the charter for all 3 of these organizations, the National Quartet Convention, Gospel Music Association, and the Gospel Music Hall of Fame. And the first quartet convention was in 1957 in Memphis, Tennessee.
Although JD would be the innovator of these great institutions, he was most proud of the friendships he cherished.
I think the friendship between Daddy and Jake Hess was cultivated by 2 kids, you know, just having this burning desire to do nothing but sing. I mean, they were in the very, you know, together in the very first quartet that I think each one of them basically sang in. Jake is my godfather. They've always been friends. They've been, you know, for each other and a part of each other's lives since I have a memory.
I don't know anyone that, any 2 guys that had a desire to sing in a male quartet more than George and I did. Of course, those of you that know me know that I called him George. And here's how he got that name. We had been somewhere to sing one morning, and we stopped at this restaurant to have breakfast. And there was an extra chair there. And so the waitress said, well, what does he want? I said, oh, and JD said, who? She said, who's, and I said, oh, he's gone to the bathroom somewhere. He'll be back. I said, just bring him scrambled eggs. And JD said, no, he doesn't have scrambled eggs. He wants his eggs over medium. I said, no, you want scrambled eggs. And JD said, over medium. So we ordered 1 egg scrambled and 1 over medium. And then she said, well, what meat would he like? I said, bacon crisp. She said, no, sausage. And we kicked that thing round and round. And finally we ended up, he got 1 egg scrambled and 1 egg over medium, and he got ham. And the manager of the Quartet got mad and walked out on us. And anyway, we referred to the guy, the invisible man there, as George. It's only fitting that we should keep that going, so that's where I started calling JD George. And I called him that for 52 years.
But I just want you to know just how close George and I really are. You see, George smokes, I get cancer. I'm telling you the truth. Last year, I was nominated for the Gospel Music Hall of Fame. George was inducted. We were up in Ohio. James told you part of this story. I wasn't feeling too well that morning, so I took a laxative. Didn't affect me, did George. We still close, George?
The first time I met JD, I think it was some. I'm not real good at dates, places, but I think it was Greenwood, South Carolina. The Blue Ridge and the Blackwoods were working together. And back in those days, we went on first, and sometimes Elmo and the guys would sing a few songs. Then all of a sudden, Elmo would pick somebody out of the group to do a couple of solos while they went in the back and just hung out a while, you know. So that night they asked me to do a couple of solos. Me and Kenny Gates, the piano player, stayed out there. Well, I sang a solo, and then I told Kenny, I said, I was going to do something silly. I said, give me a key. Kenny said, what key? I said, it don't make no difference. He said, yeah, it does. It may be in the wrong key. I said, no, just give me a roll of piano. And I did the laughing song for the first time that night. A little bit later, when we walked off stage, when we were through with our stand, I passed JD. JD shook my hand, and he said, anybody that can be that big an idiot, I want to be their friend. So we were friends for 42 years, JD and I.
In 1963, the Blackwoods purchased the Stamps Quartet Music Company, and with it inherited the Stamps Quartet. The now struggling Stamps Quartet needed a boost, and JD had a plan.
In 1965, he came to me and he said, I think to make this work, I'm going to have to sing in the Stamps Quartet. I can travel with them. So we just swapped bass singers. Big John Hall came to us, and he went with the Stamps Quartet.
Rolling along, singing a song, I have him by my side. Nothing to fear, he is near. With my Lord I roll along, looking ahead, nothing to dread. No trouble come my way. I hold his hand, he understands, he's with me all the way. Rolling along, my Lord by my side. sins he took away. So now I roll along.
I was working for JD. He had a talent agency called Sumar Talent Agency. I'd had a group since 1959, decided to get off the road, and so I went to work at his talent agency. And I got a call one day, and he said, we're losing our baritone singer, and I need you to fill in until I can audition somebody. And so I filled in ever since. When I joined the group, it was JD and Ed Enoch, Bill Bays, and then myself, and Ronnie Mae played the piano.
Seems that now they don't worry about telling that old story of salvation and a dedicated life. In the good old days when they preached amazing grace, in the good old days at that old country church, we would gather around at that old camp meeting ground, and the saints of God would shout and sing and pray.
I can still hear them singing of those hymns, and they're ringing in my heart as they did way back then. Saints of God would start crying, singing, marching up to Zion, and they'd sing until they said the last amen.
I can still see the tear stain at the foot of the altar made by sinners who were running out of time. Then the glory started rolling, and the bells from heaven told it when the biggest tear stain made was mine.
In the
good old days when they preached amazing grace, in the good old days at that old country church, we would gather around at that old camp meeting ground, and the saints of God would shout and sing and pray. In the good old days when they preached amazing grace, in the good old days at that old country church, we would gather around at that old camp meeting ground, and the saints of God would shout and sing and pray. In the good old days when they preached amazing grace, in the good old days at that old country church, we would gather around at that old camp meeting ground, and the saints of God would shout and sing and pray. And the saints of God would shout and sing and pray.
During those early years, a young man from Memphis, Tennessee became a huge fan and was greatly influenced by gospel quartet music. The young man was Elvis Presley.
We attended First Assembly of God Church in Memphis, and Elvis attended Sunday school there as a young boy. And he would come to we had a singing every month at the auditorium in Memphis, gospel sing. And Elvis came to it, and we all became acquainted with him there. And one month we didn't see him at the singing. JD asked him, why weren't you at the singing? He said, I didn't have the money to buy a ticket. So JD said, well, you don't have to buy a ticket. Just come to the stage door, we'll let you in.
Anytime Elvis was in town, he always came out and listened to the gospel music and the conventions. He certainly was excited about the convention. I remember one year we had him come to the convention, and the colonel wouldn't let him sing, but I introduced him. And the fans just came to the stage. Our fans would criticize. They criticized me when I started to work with Elvis. But then you bring Elvis there, and it was almost like rock and roll. They were just as excited about him as anybody else. But he came, and we had both buildings full. And he walked around. The stage covered both sides of the building. He walked around, and he swayed his hips when he walked. And when he got through, the crowd was the people was trying to get on the stage. It was gospel fans. And so when he got all the way around, well, then I decided, because I introduced him. He was my buddy. I introduced him. So I decided I was going to do the same walk he did, and it threw my back out of the joint. I was trying to sway my hips the way he was.
He always said that he would never be a backup for anyone. He knew that by taking that responsibility of doing something that he was, ridiculed, the entire business was against, him going with Elvis. They couldn't believe it. But he knew he was setting up a platform by which he would be able to sing gospel music to more people, than probably anyone in our business had ever had the capability of doing.
At the time that Elvis wanted us to come sing with him, he had the Imperials, and they had a double booking, so he got a hold of me, and it so happened at that time I had a quartet that was capable. I had Richard Sturbin, who is now with the Oak Ridge Boys, singing the bass. I had two bass singers. And so I booked him mainly just so that I wouldn't have to work. I'd go along and play golf, which was right on the plane. But when we got there, he said, "No, I got you a mic by yourself. I want some of those 56 endings." And what he meant by that was, the low stuff. And he made me sing with him.
When we went with Elvis Presley, it was an interesting situation because we were criticized a lot by some of the gospel music followers. And JD had a saying about that I thought was rather amusing. He always got up and in a lot of places, and when he was going to explain that in a gospel concert, he'd say, "I used to always say that I wouldn't sing with that old Elvis until I got the chance." We had the chance, we took the chance, and because we took the chance, we were able eventually to work into a spot of starting the Elvis show every single night with 20 minutes of gospel music. The very first words that anybody heard on the Elvis Presley show was, "Tell me the story of Jesus."
He called me and said, "JD, I want you to do me a favor." I said, "Okay." He said, "I want you to open the show tonight. The Sweets are upset." So I said, "My God, that's what I've been waiting on." So I got my boys together. And I said, "We're going to open the show tonight for Elvis." And one of them said, "Well, I can sing West Virginia." And the other one said, "I can sing by the time I get to Phoenix." I said, "No, you don't get the idea. We're going to sing gospel." And I said, "That's our kind of music." We got 2 standing ovations. And Elvis told me, he said, "I always wondered if gospel music would go on my show." And he said, "You proved it tonight, so from now on, come H or high water, you're going to open the show." And he said, "Here's a little something for doing me that favor. Give me a check for $10,000. I said, "Call me anytime you want to, buddy."
Once he gained Elvis's confidence and Elvis allowed them to front the show, he just wasn't a backup singer. He brought gospel music front and center. Of all the accomplishments, that was one of the main goals that he was most proud. He had that desire to bring gospel music, to people that would not ordinarily hear it.
By every measure that I think you could possibly invoke, gospel music was the center post of Elvis's existence. The fact that the king of rock and roll would gather the group around and sing gospel music to get ready to record popular rock and roll music, and then when they were done, would stay up half the night singing gospel music. For all of the people in Elvis's life, there were a handful, and JD was one, that he shared that passion for gospel music with. And that bound them from the early days to literally beyond his death.
I'm sure that Elvis always felt real good having JD and the boys with him. It made him more secure. I think Elvis was kind of particular about who he worked with, and some people more than others he was very comfortable with, and it just made things easy for him. Well, for example, he knew that if he went into a gospel song, the boys would pick right up on it. They'd be right into it. There'd be no problem. Of course they knew it. It just made it easy for him. I don't think Elvis could have done without JD, you know, when it all said and done.
In the world of Elvis, there's there's God, Jesus Christ, Elvis Presley, and JD Sumner, and that's just the way it is, and everyone accepts it. And you know, if you're going to work, you know, with Graceland and be with the fans, and in the world of Elvis, that was just what we all accepted.
To show you about JD's devotion, how much he loved Elvis. One night during, I think it was in Las Vegas, Elvis and all of his guys made it up that they would stage a fake attempt on Elvis' life, but didn't tell JD.
Got all the stamps together before the show started and said, now be on the lookout, especially when we do You've Lost That Loving Feeling, when the lights go down and Elvis turns his back and they pinpoint his head. Everybody down there, you look at this, you concentrate on this part of the audience. Ed, you concentrate on this part, Bill, etc. Everybody had a little section they were responsible for. Nothing happened on the first show, so we go up to the suite to make better plans for the second show. While we were in the suite, Sonny West slipped around through the hall and came back down through the servants' hall into Elvis's suite and had on a black velvet jacket with a ski mask on, and he hollered out profanity at Elvis and called him a name and started shooting at Elvis through the doorway and unloaded about 3 or 4 rounds.
The other guys all suddenly burst in the door with shooting. Of course, they were shooting blanks.
Elvis knew how to do one of these bullet tucks, they call it. And he jumped backwards and did that little thing where he flies up there and he sprawled out on the floor. And JD just knew that Elvis had been shot but didn't know how bad.
And JD just jumped all of a sudden and spread like that on top of Elvis. To shield him, he thought they were trying to kill him. And he said later, just without thinking, I mean, that was just a reaction like that I was to guard Elvis.
And although it was a prank, Elvis knew that JD didn't know that it was a prank. And he had covered his whole body with his body to protect him.
And then he saw all the guys laughing and Elvis laughing. But that demonstrated how much he loved Elvis. I'm sure Elvis never forgot that either.
And for that reason, from then on, if JD mentioned it, it was in the parking lot within 15 minutes.
He decided he wanted to give away this white limo, the Lincoln. So he offered it to JD, and JD said, sure, I'll take it. So after everything's sort of doled out, and so we're all going home. So the sessions are over, we can all go home. So Elvis gathers, so, I mean, you know, a lot of time is passing, Elvis is upstairs. So JD takes everybody and said, let's go, guys. They all get in the limo, and they head back to Nashville. Well, Elvis is assembling everybody to go out front and watch JD drive off in the limo. Well, David Briggs, and I rode with David Briggs to the sessions over there. We know that JD and Ed and everybody, they've already gone. They said goodbye. I figured Elvis wasn't coming back down. He was gone for the day. So JD and David Briggs and I say goodbye to everybody. We say, well, we're going. So I get in the van with David Briggs, and we pull out around the front of Graceland. There's Elvis smoking a cigar, and there's everybody, you know, the Sweet Inspirations and all the help. And they're all standing on the front of the porch, and David rolls the window down and says, what are you guys doing? And they say, oh, we're waiting. Elvis said, we're waiting on JD to leave in a big limo. We said, oh, cool. We're going, he's been gone for like 30 minutes.
I can thoroughly understand why Elvis loved having JD come into his bedroom here at Graceland, and they sat together there and talked about life and the Bible and what actually we were all here for, the real reason of being in this life, and what was going to be after this life and how much better it's going to be. And I got to share in a lot of that with JD.
They had that bond, that thing that cemented all the edges, and it sanded all the things where everything was smooth. And it was a beautiful, beautiful thing to see. I never quite understood it when it was going on, because I think that old hindsight thing comes in. But now, as I look back, I see respect in its deepest form on both sides.
On August 16, 1977, the world was stunned at the loss of the greatest rock and roll legend of all time. And so too was one of his closest friends, JD Sumner.
We're back live in front of the Graceland Mansion here, the home of Elvis Presley, as the vigil continues. And with me, if you haven't recognized him already, is one of Elvis Presley's favorites, JD Sumner of the Stamper Quartet. JD, we at Channel 5 know how close you and Elvis were, and we all extend our condolences. When was the last time you saw Elvis, JD?
Well, in the last week. These are just things that we don't understand. I can't believe it. I've seen him 3 times, and I can't believe it. It's just one of those things that you and I could be dead in the next 5 minutes. God called, and we were supposed to be in Portland, Maine tonight, and he had a bigger appearance to make.
How long had you been with Elvis?
Since 1972. Of course, I've been knowing Elvis since he was 14 years old. I used to let him in the back door of Gospel Sing when I was with the Blackwood brothers here in Memphis. And we've just been close friends since then. I sang at his mother's funeral, and as sad as it's going to be, I got to sing it here.
I was going to say, we understand that you will sing at the funeral tomorrow. What kind of songs will you sing, JD?
Well, the songs that he loved to hear, we've sung for him many times, and we'll sing the songs, the gospel songs that he loved to hear. I mean, his favorites.
I remember when he got the call from Vernon to come to Memphis and help plan the funeral. He was in shock. I mean, he was just, you know, it was like losing a member of the family. They had been very close, and he knew that you know, the world had lost probably the most important entertainer of our times, but to him he was also losing this young kid that he had watched grow up and turn into this superstar.
We opened Graceland in June of '82, kind of on a wing and a prayer. There was a record, an acetate on Elvis's turntable, and I can remember thinking, well, that'll be interesting to, what was the last record that he had on his turntable when he died, because everything was untouched, and it was the stamps. One thing we knew was to leave it there, and not touch it, and so it stayed on that turntable for years and years and years.
Despite the death of Elvis, the Stamps continued recording, traveling, and making numerous television appearances.
There forever to be safe in his fold. Some morning you'll find me touring that city where the Son of God is alive. You'll find me there on streets so pretty, made of gold, so pure and so bright, with Jesus, the one who gave me the victory, who led me across the divide. Some morning you'll find me touring that city where with him I will ever abide. Here on earth we have troubles to us seem so heavy, but in heaven no one will be sad. Mom and Dad will be singing, heaven's praises be ringing for the dearest friend I ever had. Some morning you'll find me touring that city where the Son of God is alive. You'll find me there on streets so pretty, made of gold, so pure and so bright, with Jesus, the one who gave me the victory, who led me across the divide. Some morning you'll find me touring that city where with him I will ever abide. Some morning you'll find me touring that city where the Son of God is alive. You'll find me there on streets so pretty, made of gold, so pure and so bright. With Jesus, the one who gave me the victory, who led me across the divide. Some morning you'll find me touring that city where with him I will ever abide.
The Stamps disbanded for a short time in 1980. However, later that same year, a new group was formed, a group of old friends, legends, together again.
After I left the Blackwood Brothers in late 1980, and helped with JD and Hovey Lister and Jake Hess to form the Masters Five. JD had disbanded the Stamps Quartet temporarily, and Hovey was having personnel trouble with the Statesman, and JD was filling in with him singing bass. And Jake Hess had left the Imperials and had been in California singing a few years and had just moved back to Nashville. And so they got together and decided to form a group and called me and wanted to know if I was interested. The group was known as the Masters Five then, with Rosie Roselle and Jake, JD, Hovey, and me.
Once I was sinking in sin, my soul was troubled within, but a ladder was sent down from heaven after my sins were forgiven. Started out for higher ground to climb the ladder round by round. Oh, well, I'm climbing higher and I won't come down. First round was regeneration, second round justification, the third a happy confession, and then the Holy Ghost took possession. The next round was great tribulation that leads your soul to glorification. Oh, well, I'm climbing higher and I won't come down. I'm gonna climb till I pass the sun, moon, and stars, Jupiter, Venus, Neptune, and Mars. Bid farewell to this old house of clay, and then I go running up the Milky White Way. I'm climbing round by round. I'm so high I'll never come down. Still climbing round by round. I'm climbing for higher ground. Well. I'm gonna climb till I pass the sun, moon, and stars, Jupiter, Venus, Neptune, and Mars. Bid farewell to this old house of clay, and then I go running up the Milky White Way. I'm climbing round by round. I'm so high I'll never come down. Still climbing round by round, climbing for higher ground.
In 1985, after years of being the practical joker, country and gospel music artists alike had the chance to get even as an annual roast was held. And this time, the joke was on JD.
There was everybody from Ray Stevens to the Statler Brothers to Don Light to Wendy Bagwell, Tammy Wynette, and one by one they just nailed Daddy to the wall.
Jerry just informed me a moment ago that we roasters can't say anything about the roastee that would jeopardize his chances of staying in the gospel music field. That's it for me.
JD came by my house one day with a horrible black eye, and he said, "Look what Mary done to me." And I said, "I thought she was out of town." And he said, "I thought she was too."
I noticed when this thing started, all these people had pages and pages of things written down to say, and I didn't have anything written down. I'd never been to a roast before. So I just, as it went along today, made a few little notes here. I was sitting right back behind Tammy Wynette a while ago, and there were quite a few that was requesting pictures of JD and Tammy together. So JD, so as you did, he got up and went over and sat down in the chair and had Tammy sit in his lap. He said, "Tammy, it's okay. I'm an old man. You can just sit here in my lap. It's all right." And after a few minutes, JD said, "Tammy, I believe you better get up. I'm not as old as I thought I was."
But I'm proud to be here to honor a legend, a real legend, an Iron Man. Really, a lot's been said about what he's gone through in his health and this and that, and if I could be a little serious kind of to begin with, let me just say that he overcame a bout with his heart, with heart disease that a lot of people couldn't get over. His recent bout with AIDS, he's come through.
I've loved and I've honored this man, admired him, since back in the 20s when he sang with the Chuckwagon Gang.
He never sang with the Chuckwagon Gang, and it didn't go back to the 2020s. You're thinking about the Blackwood brothers.
The Blackweed brothers, okay. Blackwood brothers, I got you, okay. Back in the 50s. Back in the 50s, okay, I got it. Don't keep interrupting, man. I know what I'm doing.
All right.
It's been said that JP is a hit. JD. It's been said that JP is ahead of his time. We figure about 20 minutes. All kidding aside, though, I watch his show every Friday night, and him and Sue Ellen sometimes get into...
What? Look, that's JR.
Okay.
This is JD. That's Dallas. Do you know where you're at?
No.
No.
JD Sumner's voice not only amazed his gospel music fans, but the Guinness Book of World Records recorded JD singing the lowest note ever registered, a double low C. This note is sung on the recording of Blessed Assurance, and again on the Elvis Presley recording of Way Down.
JD was probably the most unusual voice ever come along in our business. He was, I don't care if it was early in the morning or middle afternoon or late at night, JD always had an incredible low voice. On recitations, he was impeccable, you know. And singing low notes, it wasn't just growling. He had a tone to those low notes, you know. A lot of people hit a low note, but it sounded like they're grunting, you know. It's not singing, but he could sing those low notes. And he was an incredible voice, that JD was. Probably, I don't think there's ever been another one like him, you know. Never.
I'm just amazed at JD's voice because we sing with so many different bass singers, and every time you're working with a bass singer, they all want more volume. You have to just keep turning them up, turning them up, turning them up. And it just amazed me that after just getting through with a group that has a bass singer where I've had him cranked up as far as I could get him to go, that JD would come up there and turn it down to like maybe half the volume they had and just blow you away with his voice.
JD brought a new style of bass singing into the professional quartet world. He not only could he sing the normal bass register, but he created this this kind of a freakish sound. Somebody said it was freakish. I don't know where he got that bit, but he developed a low register there. Well, in the Guinness Book of Records, you know, he was the lowest bass singer that ever lived, and he did that on his own. He created that extra register down there that no other bass singer in the business ever had until Sumner came along.
His voice is just so incredible. I don't think there'll ever be another voice like that. And it was always that way. I mean, every day. And every time I'd run into him after I hadn't seen him for a while, I'd think, you know, I didn't remember that it was that low. But it always was. You know, he could sing right on off the scale of the piano. No trick at all for him. He always said the secret of that was being able to relax the vocal cords. And I've tried it and tried it and tried to figure out what he's trying to tell me. It doesn't work for me, but it worked for him very well.
Although JD's career was demanding in every aspect, his love for his music was only overshadowed by his love for his family and his precious wife, Mary.
Mary was, you know, was such a lady and always took such good care of JD. But I always admired her because she had such grace about her. But at the same time, she was kind of always in the background. She never really seemed to want center stage. And that was JD's place. And she was perfectly happy and content with that. And it was just fun to watch her as she watched JD and how she just never seemed to ever be anything but total grace.
So we'd stop the bus some truck stop. At that time, we had no mobile phones, and a payphone worked quite well back in those days. And he would call her and tell her he loved her. And hang up. Wouldn't say anything else but that. We get back on the bus. We go back down the road again, and in a few minutes he said, stop the bus on his phone. He'd go back in. He would call her and say, I love you. Hang the phone up. And we did that for many, many times. And then he had several dozen roses sent to her so that the roses would get there right before we would get home because he wanted to be a special time for them. I can't remember doing anything that romantic. I can't, it's kind of like you would see in an old movie. But the story is so true. You know, that love was a bond that death can't break.
Mother dying before Daddy did was the biggest shock of all as far as the family was concerned, because we always figured we'd lose Daddy first. And in late August, early September of '92, we found out that Mother had 3 melanoma brain tumors and that she had, at best, 3 months to live. And I'm not sure Daddy ever recovered from that. I mean, it was finding out that, you know, that the love of his life of 52 years, 52 and a half years, you know, would not be there. He was never the same. You know, he tried to bounce back, and he did, of sorts. And his life was full, but there was always that underlying, you know, misery of not having my mother.
Although the loss of Mary affected him deeply, JD found solace in his music and the love of his family, especially his grandchildren.
He loved his grandchildren. He's got Kathy, who is grown, has 3 babies, and then my son Jason. He adored both of his grandchildren. Because Jason lived in and around Knoxville, he and Jason shared a great deal of time, you know, right toward the end. And of course, Daddy lived long enough for Jason to be a young man.
Behind the seemingly gruff exterior laid a gentle and giving man. His generosity was one of his greatest gifts.
We're on the bus going to a church to sing, and we always leave at night, 10 o'clock at night, and we'll get there in plenty of time to get a hotel, clean up, and then have a lunch before we go to the show to set up the sound. So Mark Lowry happened to be on the trip with us, and he told Mark, now don't eat anything on the way. He said, when we get there, there's a great steakhouse there.
I starved all the way to Georgia. We pull into a Western Sizzler. That is the great steakhouse. And I like Western Sizzler, but you know, I wouldn't starve for it. You know, I starved clear across Tennessee and Georgia waiting for this great steak. Get there and it's Western Sizzler. We passed 20 Western Sizzlers to get to this one in Georgia. We go in there, and it wasn't any better than the rest of them.
So we got there, and we're all sitting at a big table, and somebody on there, I can't recall who it was, but they were kind of cheap, you know. They never left a tip or whatever, you know. So he told this person, he said, "You just give this lady some money right now for a tip." And I guess they gave a couple of dollars, and Mark says, "What'd you do that for?" He said, "Well, you give them $20 too." So Mark put $20 on the tray, and he put $20 on the tray. So the lady had probably $50 on the tray. And she was just standing there wide-eyed, and then she started crying. And she said, "You don't know what you're doing." And she said, "I'm dying with cancer." And she said, "I'm trying to save all the money I can for my children before I die." So JD always carried in his pocket no less than $1,000. And he had it in his hand. When she said that, he just dropped the whole amount on her tray.
All that money was gone. I asked him later, I said, "How much did you give her?" He said, "I don't know, and it doesn't matter. I won't miss it." But he was always blessing people like that.
We did the Ryman Auditorium Friday night sing in Nashville. And Wally Fowler, JD, myself, and Elmo Fagg was going to Birmingham for the next date. We was in one car. Somebody went off with a cash box. We didn't have a lot of cash anyhow, but you'd get enough to eat on. Well, I didn't have any money. Wally didn't, and Elmo didn't. JD had $5. So we went in this place to get a cup of coffee because there's a place right outside of Birmingham that had great hot dogs. Coffee would have cost us about $1, and then we got 2 hot dogs apiece right before we got to Birmingham. You know. So we went and sat down and got coffee. The waitress come along and recognized JD. Oh, she hugged his neck. She said, "You're the greatest singer that ever walked. What an honor to meet such a man like you." Well, when JD paid for the coffee, he gave her the $5 bill. He paid for the $1 coffee and gave her a $4 tip. We didn't have a dime left, you know. Didn't have a dime left. We got on him all the way. He said, "Well, boys, she recognized me. What was I going to do, you know?" He gave her hot dogs away.
In May of 1997, the gospel music industry took the opportunity to give back to this legend who had given so much. JD Sumner was inducted into the Southern Gospel Music Hall of Fame.
Well, I don't know of anybody that deserves this more than me. No, I wish that all those good things that Bill said was true. I'm just fortunate to have been blessed. Nothing means any more to me than my friends, and that's you. I love you. God bless you. If this earthly tabernacle would be dissolved today, I'd trade it for a finer one that would not pass away. But until the day arrives, it's time for moving out. It's such a joy to know the Lord still lives in this old house. has fortified these walls. Peace has reigned since he's been walking up and down these halls. There's snow upon the rooftops now, and these hinges are near worn out. It's such sweet peace to know the Lord still lives in this old house. To him it's been a dwelling place where he kept my hand in his. To me it's home, away from home is all that it really is. And it sure ain't fine and fancy, and all I can boast about is after all the years the Lord still lives in this old house. There were times when he had to write just up and move away. And there were times and days I know it took God's amazing grace to stay. But he never left this old building one. That's why I can sing and shout. It's such a joy to know the Lord still lives in this old house. To him it's been a dwelling place where he kept my hand in his. To me it's home, away from home is all that it really is. And it sure ain't fine and fancy, and all I can boast about is after all the years the Lord still lives in this old house.
After all these years, the Lord
still lives in this old house.
Few months that I was around him, about the only thing he wanted to talk about was spiritual matters, about what really is being born again, what really is heaven. How can you know that you're going? What happens to people that you love when they pass into eternity? And for the last at least 3 years, I saw that escalating greater and greater and becoming bigger and bigger in his life.
He said, said, this may come as a shock to you, but said, you know who brought me back to the Lord? And I said, no, I don't have any other idea. He said, Mark Lowry. He said, Mark Lowry explained grace to me like no one ever could before.
I'd read a book called The Grace Awakening by Chuck Swindoll. I'd go over eat with JD and sit around his little condo up there. We'd sit around and talk about what I was learning in that book. And he would ask me what certain words mean, and I would explain it to him, you know. And then he would mull it over. He'd mull things over. You could see that fertile mind. I mean, he had a great mind to the day he died. And he would mull those things over and then spit them back to you on a level that anybody could get it. I mean, the cookies were on the bottom shelf when J.D. got through thinking about it.
Even though J.D. realized his time was short, he never lost his desire to perform or his sense of humor.
I get up every morning at 5 o'clock. I spend 225 days on my bus. I get up every morning at 5 o'clock, and that's the most precious time of the day. That's when me and Jesus do a lot of talking. Ain't nobody up but me and him. I can get a hold of him a lot easier. I thank him for everything and ask him to forgive me for things I've done yesterday, and he does. Ask him to help me to be a better boy tomorrow, and he does. I sat there and drank my coffee, and I watched that CNN. I ain't got none of that channel HBQ on there. Nothing. Or movie channel. I ain't got nothing on there but CNN, History, A&E, and Discovery. I love to watch CNN. I want to see what old Bill done yesterday. He been a busy boy, ain't he? But I was sitting there watching CNN the other morning, drinking my coffee. Young man come on there and said, "Have I got good news for you?" I said, "Well, thank you, Jesus." I got up on the edge of my chair. I said, "It's been so long since I've heard some good news on television. I wanted to hear this." And I'm 73, and it's hard for me to move around real good, but I said, "I want to hear this." He said, "They've raised the life expectancy from 68 to 73. Fool sat right there and told me I was going to die. They say we got 2.5 minutes. We love you. We just came by to tell you about Jesus. That's what it's all about. I would love to tell you what I think of Jesus since I found in him a friend so kind and true. I would tell you how he changed my life completely. He did something that no other friend could do. No one ever cared for me and you like Jesus. There's no other friend so kind as he. No one else could take this old sin and sorrow from me, so far from me. Oh, how much he cared for me.
1998 was probably the toughest year for Daddy for several different reasons, but his health was failing him, and we guarded that.
We all realized that he wasn't feeling good. We could see him kind of going down, but it's like not as probably as much as somebody that's seen him ever so often. It's like watching a kid grow up. They grow up in front of you. You don't notice how much they've grown, but I could tell on the bus he would sit and he would lay down more and do things of that nature, and like we've talked before, he seemingly tried to make, if you thought he hurt your feelings, he was trying to make up with anybody who thought he'd hurt his feelings, and I think the Lord let him know that his time was short, and so he was trying to take advantage of that.
It's a cold, dreary day, and I'm laying in my room. You see, I don't have long to live, and I'll be leaving here soon. Oh, I've had a good life with so many happy memories, and I relived them all today, and they were so real to me.
I had gone out, as I did every day, to the bus, because we were remodeling it, and they were leaving on Wednesday night, and I had gone and gotten dinner, and we were going to run an errand, and we got in the car, and he said, "I want to play you the new project," and he put the tape in.
I remember when I married
and we started listening to the songs, and each of those songs brought back memories of when they were written in my childhood, growing up in Memphis, him being a part of the Blackwoods, and I knew the words to 90% of the songs, and all of a sudden, a particular song came on the tape, and it was a song called "Oh Man Death." And he had written that song like 20 years ago. And it's a very powerful song, just the words. But when I heard him do it on that particular project that night, I thought my chest was going to explode. I mean, I listened to it, and he was driving, and I was sitting across from him. And I wouldn't look at him because Daddy, or our whole family, are crybabies. But Daddy and we couldn't say very much without breaking down. So I wouldn't look at him.
Okay, old boy.
But that song was just heart-wrenching because I felt like he was saying goodbye. And the song played, and he punched a rewind, and I thought, oh my God, he's going to play it again. And I was looking out the window, and he played it again. Well, by that time, I was crying, and I thought, what am I going to do? Straighten up, don't let him, just behave and all this kind of stuff. And it was at night, and when you're in the dark in the car, you don't see but just the silhouette of someone. But I turned and looked at him, and he had punched rewind again and was playing the song for the third time, and I looked at him, and tears were dripping off his chin. Of course, by then I just let it go. I was sobbing, and I just said, "Daddy, I can't stand it. I can't stand to listen to this song again." And he said, "Baby, you're going to have to, because it's going to happen. Someday it's going to happen." But he was telling me that he knew that someday was closer than either one of us wanted to say. And when he left that night, I really and truly had the sense that he was saying goodbye. And I would never see him again. And I did.
And I remember when I married my little woman, and how we toiled together to raise our family. It seemed that she'd strive and do things every day to make it easier on me. You see, God gave us 2 little girls, and again today I heard them cry.
we had a condo over in Myrtle Beach where we were staying, and the night before JD died, the day before, he had gotten sick, and we took him to the emergency room, and they gave him a little bit of medicine and told him that he had a little bit of bronchitis, and that's why he was feeling so bad. So he began to feel better when we woke up the next morning, and we went out for dinner that night and had a big steak and a good time. And we were actually sitting around the table singing. I mean, that's kind of stupid. JD never did that. And at one point, he just looked over at me and he said, I think of you as my son. I think that maybe you're an angel that God sent to me. And he never said that before. I mean, why would he say it then unless he knew he was going to go pretty quick, And so we went on back home and to the condo, and I always fixed the coffee so that all he'd have to do in the morning was get up and turn it on, and in just a minute he had coffee, because I've come in the kitchen before and watched him, and he'd have on his sleeping clothes, and he'd be looking, bending down, looking at the coffee, just waiting for it to get done. He'd have a cup in his hand, just ready. We're going to pour that thing and slurp it right down. But that morning when I woke up, I slept a little bit later than usual. It was about 7 o'clock because JD got up with the chickens. And I looked out of my bedroom door and I saw that coffee sitting out there hadn't dripped yet. So I kind of, I thought, this might be the day. I always dreaded that day. But sure enough, I went in and there he had died in his sleep.
In November of 1998, JD Sumner went to be with his beloved wife, Mary. His friends gathered in Nashville, Tennessee to bid their friend a final farewell.
I know he's in a better place. I know JD's happy and he's singing. He's making the thunder boom.
I wouldn't want him back. Not in that. He could having trouble breathing, couldn't walk. He was homesick for Mary. He wanted to see Jesus. I mean, I think the scales were tipped over there. He had more over there than he had over here. I hear that happen at some point in your life. I've got his picture in my bathroom. I see it every morning. Look at it and think about him.
I'm a better man having known JD Sumner. He's a wonderful guy. I loved him very much.
Oh, friends, like a rare piece of gold. Oh, friends, make it great to grow old. Oh, friends, what a wonderful friend. Oh, friends.
He was an old friend. There's no way that a man could have a better life around here. Ain't no way. And I got a lot of friends, thank God. If I die tomorrow, I've had a ball.
While resting one day by the side of the road, I saw an old farmer in a field he just hoed. His face was all brown and wrinkled by the wind, and he is talking to the Lord just like he'd be talking to a friend. Well, sir, he said in a voice calm and quiet, them corn tassels needs a sacking, but I got no string to tie it. Ain't had no rain in so long, the fields is mighty dusty, and it's been so unbearable hot, even the kids is getting fussy. And you take the grass in that pasture, Lord, why it ought to have been knee-high. If we could just get a shower or two, it might keep the cow from going dry. Oh, but listen to me a-talking. You'd think that I wasn't grateful. And if you didn't know me so well, Lord, you'd think I was downright hateful. You'd think that I wasn't thankful for the new calf that you sent and the money that came in the mail to pay up the rent. Ma's coal's better and Johnny's home from the Navy. And that Sunday dinner with chicken, dumplings, and gravy. And the new preacher that you sent us, Lord, He sure is a fine young man. Why, he's been converting them sinners just to beat the band. Well, guess I'll be moseying along, Lord, and not take up no more of your time. I guess heap of folks hereabouts is waiting to ring your line. Evening to you, Lord, and watch over us tonight, and don't go worrying about us none, 'cause everything's gonna be all right.